Good morning. Welcome to worship with us here at First Parish in Framingham. Welcome to all those who are present in body, you here. And also welcome to, and this was a quick list from about 10 minutes ago, those who are online, to Wendy and Beth, Larry, Margaret, I guess that was Larry Bassett, Linda, Walter, Pat Greeley. Special thanks as well to our virtual ushers online, Heather and Jan. It is good to be with you all today. The First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate all of who you are. So whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Again, a special thanks to all those who are helping make this service happen, to Dean and Deb for sharing music. This is Bring Your Father to Work Day, so thank you, Dad, for manning the tech over there as well. Rebecca and Sarah are currently feeling under the weather, so they are staying away today, which means our religious exploration program will start next week. Love has gathered our congregation together since 1701. It's a love that is stronger and larger than this gathering, than those walls over there. So welcome, everyone, to First Parish in Framingham. Elizabeth Murphy, our ministerial intern, will light our chalice today.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning comes from poet Christy Ann Martine. When your world moves too fast and you lose yourself in the chaos, introduce yourself to each color of the sunset. Reacquaint yourself with the earth beneath your feet. Thank the air that surrounds you with every breath you take. Find yourself in the appreciation of life. And in this spirit, we light our chalice. If you're joining us at home, it's a little tricky, yeah. If you're joining us at home on Zoom, we invite you to light your own chalice and type in the chat, the chalice is lit in our home, or the chalice is lit in my home.
Circle of kinship.
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
If you are wondering about the hearts that you received as you came in, just hold on a little bit longer. We'll tell you what we're going to do with those. And our story this morning comes from the Hindu faith tradition. Our main character is King Rantideva. He was a most holy man and spent all of his time worshiping Lord Vishnu. Since all of this time was spent in prayer and worship, he only existed on what food and shelter came along to him. Sometimes there was plenty of food to enjoy, but there once came a time where there was no food or water for 48 days. And on the 49th day, purely by Lord Vishnu's grace, Rantideva got some porridge. He was about to eat his meal when 3 strangers, one at a time, appeared, asking for food. In each stranger that came, all Rantideva could see them was his beloved Lord. And one by one he served them until there was no food left for himself. Finally, he was about to drink some water when an outcast arrived there, crying for some water. Overcome by compassion, Rantideva, who had neither food nor water for days, happily parted with his last drop. Even during these moments of extreme poverty, he was the wealthiest when it came to compassion. There was no expectation in his kindness. Out of immense compassion for fellow beings, he prayed to the Lord that he did not seek liberation or the highest yogic state, but that he would rather take on the sufferings of all souls to relieve them of their misery. Now, as it happens, it was the gods Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva who had disguised themselves in different forms to test Rantideva's strength and devotion, then revealed themselves before him. But Rantideva did not ask for anything from them. This is the point in the story where those of us who grew up on a diet of Western fairy tales and stories that reward good people expect that the gods would heap upon Rantideva all sorts of food and rewards. But that's just not what happens at all in this story. In fact, this is where the story just ends. We would easily argue that this story is full of problems. You need to put on your own airplane oxygen masks before helping others with theirs. You shouldn't keep feeding others to the point of starvation yourself, and fair enough. It's a story that ends with discomfort. It is not a satisfactory ending. What can we learn then from this story? It is simply this. Be strangers, be kind to strangers, rather, because they have inherent worth and dignity. And here's a little secret. So too do you, my friends. We now move to a time of sharing. We share these joys which were received by email. From Walter Barker, who writes, I have attended several celebrations of my 91st birthday with friends and family during the past 2 weeks. I am very thankful for my continuing good health. Love to all. And he signs it, Walter, Wally, Dad, Cousin, Partner. From Sherry Whittemore, who writes, I'm grateful for all the support from so many people and for the meals I received through Caritas as I have recovered from my hip replacement. This joy from Andre, who writes, I wanted to share with joy that my daughter Danielle and her partner Zach were married on Saturday, September 18th. And the following concerns and sorrows, a concern from Diane Engel, who writes, her vaccinated daughter and son-in-law in California are both suffering from a tough breakthrough COVID infection. Their teenage son, quarantined along with them, is thankfully not as sick. This sorrow that Larry Decker shares, that his brother passed away on September 7th. He was 89 years old and had lived a long, good life. We will miss him very much. From Ben Long, who writes, I'm thinking about all the COVID pandemic and how much everyone is suffering. He writes, I'll feel it'll be years before everything goes back to normal. That is, if things ever go back to normal. And of course, we hold for a moment all of those unspoken joys and sorrows which remain too great to share today. Let's now take a moment to feel connected to the ground beneath us, to focus on the breath in and the breath out. Maybe feel the sun warming our faces. And again, focus on the breath in and the breath out. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls us each by our true first name, which is beloved. I give thanks for this gathering, for the sun and the clear blue sky, for the birds which were flying above this gathering, not now anymore, but earlier. This is a chance to remember our connection to the world around us. I give thanks for all of the joys which were shared. But I know too that there are hearts that are breaking, heads filled with concern. May we find ways to remind the lonely, the hurting, and the ill among us that they are not alone. Let us be a listening ear and a helping hand, even before they are asked for. As we work to bend the arc of the universe towards justice, we remember that we do not do this work alone. So let us work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world. Let us work to end all forms of oppression, knowing that this work of doing justice is a team sport. And sometimes we are reminded of our humanity. Sometimes painfully when we make mistakes, when we fumble with our words. May we be reminded that we are loved and lovable, not in spite of these imperfections, but because of them. And because of that breath in and out, there is still time to rebuild relationship. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. So now is the time where you will be writing on your heart Post-it note. We want you to write on this Post-it note this. We know that there are unspoken burdens on our hearts that scarcely go recognized even by our own selves. This week, we seek to welcome the stranger even when that stranger is our own selves. So we invite you to take some time to write anonymously on this, legibly and maybe short, a burden that is on your heart that is too heavy to carry. Later on in the service, we will ask, so Elizabeth and I will collect these and put them up on this flip chart board. And then at the end of the service, you'll be invited to take somebody else's heart, meaning that you will be taking someone else's burden home with you. So we will spend some time to write down the thing which is weighing heaviest on our hearts on this heart. And then we will collect these and put them up, and we'll read them as well. If you have any music to improvise on, that'd be Wonderful, Dean. Thank you. And when you've got something written down, just wave it high, and Elizabeth or I will collect it. Are there any others out there? These are the things which are weighing on our hearts. I may need to summarize some of them. Aging family member, anxiety, the COVID pandemic, partner's anxiety, desiring connection, knowing it is good, but fearing connection and loss of myself. Heart still aching for my beloved, loving, loyal mother. Aging in a world focused on the young, disruptions of life by COVID, selfishness, recognition of challenges of aging, recreating a meaningful life post-retirement, my son refusing to be vaccinated for COVID, struggle to think kindly of my father, educating a new teacher on how to create students who can succeed, clutter in my house of 35 years, 5-year-old special needs granddaughter cannot write her name. As a much older grandparent of young grandsons, what is best to give them? Recreating a meaningful life post-retirement. How to right wrongs. The weight of known suffering, loneliness, disparity without solution. My daughter's estrangement from her mother. Overly anxious need to relax. My husband's struggle with dealing with his father's death and handling of his estate. Concern for loving and proper care for my 90-year-old mother with Alzheimer's. What is a correct ending? Worrying about my mother. Remission, recovery, and a life. My friend with Alzheimer's and wife with cancer. Thinking with empathy of people dealing with the hurricane disaster. It could have been us going through this. Increasing isolation. My fear of making a plan. Burden and fear of breakthrough COVID infection due to Delta variant, fear of long COVID, and fires in California. My son, a kidney transplant in future, end of a relationship, procrastination. And of course, if you are online, feel free to type that burden in the chat as well. I had forgotten about that. These are the things which weigh on our hearts. Again, at the end of the service, we'll put this at the back of our gathering and take somebody else's burden home with you. I think we should sit in quiet for just a little bit longer so that we might pray the prayers of our own hearts, or rest, or listen. Amen.
And now, as we do each Sunday that we gather, we ask you to consider this congregation's deep commitment to stewardship and to how we work together to sustain our spiritual home both now and well into the future. We're grateful for your generosity. This week, I'm excited to mention a Share the Plate opportunity with the Diaper Project at A Place to Turn based in Natick. Today marks the start of National Diaper Need Awareness Week. So this Sunday and next, we invite you to make a financial contribution to A Place to Turn for the Diaper Project. Those Diaper Project donations can be made by writing a check to A Place to Turn. You can leave it with us as well. You can also contribute on their website if you prefer, which is aplacetoturn-natick.org. And however you donate, we ask that you do write First Parish Framingham and Diaper Project in the memo line, either on your check or on the box on the website. Any donation for this project is most welcome, but for your reference, $30 supplies diapers for 2 babies for about a week. And next Sunday, October 3rd, we'll be back here outside, and we're inviting everyone to bring a package of diapers with you to church. And please note that sizes 4, 5, and 6 are actually most needed. One of the reasons for that is those are the sizes that the babies stay in for a much longer time. We tend to think of the little sizes, but actually the kids move through those much more quickly. So when we get those diaper donations, we'll bring them all to a place to turn after the collection. You can learn a lot more about this work and how the project works on an ongoing basis if you look actually in the email newsletter, the Faithful Dispatch from last week. And now for those of us here today, at the close of services, I ask you to please place your donations in the collection bowl and put the paperweight back on top. And if you're joining on Zoom, you can always give out our website, uuframingham.org, and that would be clicking on the Give Now link in the top right corner. Contributions by mail are always welcome. And in this spirit, we gratefully accept the offering. Thank you.
Our reading is Love After Love by Derek Walcott. This will be familiar to some of you. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your image image from the mirror. Sit and feast on your life. Let's rewind a little bit. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us by our true first name, which is beloved. Years ago, when I started giving my pastoral prayers extemporaneously, meaning without notes, I added in the section of the pastoral prayer that we know as attribution the phrase, who calls each one of us by our true first name, which is beloved. Why do I pray that way? And what does it mean? I wish I could tell you what I first meant by that, where that impulse came from. I wish that I could tell you a great teacher prayed for me that way, and I knew that it changed something in my heart, and I would have to pray that way for the rest of my career. Nope. Or that I learned it on a retreat with a spiritual teacher. Nope. It just sort of rose out of me. I'm sure it has a lineage that I could trace. I'm sure I could trace what else I was reading at that time in my life, but I didn't have the time to do that for today. Praying those words in some fashion week after week, inevitably, congregations have responded in different ways. Some have said it is comforting because they wear many titles: parent, spouse, child, grandparent, lawyer, doctor, teacher, social worker, or nurse, or something in between. And this reminds them that at their core, they are a child of the mystery beyond understanding. Others have been told by religion, society, or other people that they are not worthy because of their gender, their orientation, their size, their abilities, their marital status, their race, their addictions, that they are not enough. And this reminder to them says, nope, none of that is true. All of you is enough. In fact, you are more than enough. You are loved. Some have wept at the thought of being beloved. And a few weeks ago, one of you wrote to me saying that it was a reminder that even when another person is being difficult or ornery, that they are at their core beloved. That despite life turning out different for another, they share a first name, a true first name, which is beloved. This is a phrase that invites us to consider that we should be welcoming to ourselves, our authentic selves, the self that we push away, the self that is struggling, alone, or doing fine, thanks, I'm succeeding, the self who knows all of our scars, bruises, and wounds, and goes on anyway. And because our self-talk can be insistent, we need that reminder that we are beloved. We are loved first and foremost. It is about being as welcoming to the stranger who was yourself as you're welcoming to the stranger who was the other. If we want to welcome the stranger, we should perhaps first start with ourselves. We have to take a step back because I believe that the first step to truly welcoming someone else is to start with the guest who is yourself. We must practice self-hospitality. If I am to be welcoming to others, I have to start with myself. Now, I consider myself to be an expert on my own flaws and insecurities. Chances are you are as well. I mean, of your own flaws, not mine. Though you might be already. I know that I can be my own harshest critic, and yet I am incredibly supportive of other people. The self-talk I repeated years ago in my head sometimes I would never say to another person, and I've gotten better. This isn't to say that the inner critic is silent. It's just I'm working on training that inner critic to provide useful feedback, not negative. Training our inner critics to call ourselves our true first name, which is beloved, takes time, especially if we are recovering perfectionists. You don't need to raise your hand, but maybe some of you are. Especially if we are uncertain if we have anything to say especially if we shame ourselves for wasting time and not being useful all the time. If we struggle with perfection, maybe it is time to learn a new hobby, where guess what? You will be unable to be perfect, unable to be skilled. It's my project to try to learn something new every now and then, to struggle up that innovation curve, and then repeat it again and again. You know that feeling when you're doing something for the first time and it takes forever? But then you repeat it and suddenly the task takes less time. It turns out that being a beginner, where the imperfection is guaranteed, can work to cure someone of being a perfectionist. If this is the inner critic that lives in your mind, look at starting or learning how to do something new. At least in my case, while, yeah, it can be frustrating, it may have cured me a little bit of it, or at least redirected it. I'll also admit that sometimes on Sunday morning, I wonder if I have anything different to say. You see, I sit with the topic that I'm preaching on for the entire week or longer. I get to a point where everything I am saying makes perfect sense. Like it's as obvious as the color of the sky or the color of the leaves. And sometimes I share it and I wonder if I just told you that the sky is blue. Something you already know, but I remember that we each have different news sources, different echo chambers, and it's important to share things that we may know plainly because it gives a different camera angle on it, or because someone else might have never even thought that way. One of the joys of this work, of this vocation, for me is getting to write and having a deadline. I love writing poetry, but then there are only so many hours in the day, so even some of those poems I was writing, I found were written as though they were to be used as liturgical pieces in worship, written to be useful by me or somebody else. I'm still learning how to write frivolously, slightly wastefully. It is freer. It's like stretching before a marathon. You need to practice your scales in order to play the symphony. You need to study how the colors mix together to paint artwork. The soul needs space to play and can get exhausted if we keep it at work all the time. The inner critic now says, buddy, keep going. Or, hey, that was good. You'll get to try it again. Maybe next time do this one thing differently. Or it says, hey, have you played lately? Do you remember that you too have inherent worth and dignity? Now the inner critic calls me beloved, or it at least tries, even if it's mumbled a little bit, even if it rolls its eyes as it's saying it under its breath. Perhaps this phrase comes from the harvest of planting Love After Love by Derek Walcott, the poem we heard earlier, planting it next to the guest house by Rumi. Well, one is a poem about welcoming the stranger who is another. The other is a poem about welcoming the stranger who is yourself. And Walcott seems to know that it might be a while before you are willing to welcome back yourself. The time will come, he writes. It may not be tomorrow, the next week, or the week after, but after a long sojourn. It's time for you to come home and say, welcome home, beloved. I will only speak for myself as a recovering New England Stoic individualist who is fine, thanks, when I say that admitting that we need help can be incredibly challenging. We have a hard time doing it. Saying to another person, you know what, I've been worried about X, Y, or Z, can reveal something about our inner selves that we do not want to reveal. Sharing that can change the inner maps that we have used to go through life. Welcoming our authentic selves invites vulnerability. And it lessens the load. And that can be scary. But in sharing our burdens, in sharing the things which weigh deepest on our hearts, in sharing the things which breaks our heart, it all of a sudden becomes something we all can carry. It can feel as though we are breaking down newly fallen snow when we are doing tough things together. but we take turns breaking trail through the newly fallen snow. It's not up to one individual to always be in the lead, to have their boots sopping wet. The rugged individual is a myth of white supremacy culture that I wish would go away. We are damaged by it even if we are not white, because of the people we elevate as heroes or the stories we tell. And it's also a myth woven by toxic masculinity that taught boys don't cry, don't ask for help, something we tell young men even if we ourselves reject it. These are powerful forces in our world. I wish that we told more stories of communal resilience in the face of tempest and turmoil. Stories of people being vulnerable where it didn't lead to crumbling facades, but instead of a stronger community. I know of one story. I think of the story of Gander, Newfoundland, after September 11th, 2001. The story is immortalized in the Broadway musical Come From Away. The story of how when U.S. airspace was closed after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 38 airliners with 7,000 passengers landed and were given shelter for 5 days. And that story is amazing on its own. It gets better, though. Gander was prepared for this. It was resilient because it had a plan. It knew, because of its location on airline routes in the age of Atlantic crossing when you needed to refuel, that it would be a place of last resort for emergencies and landings. But also during the Cold War, there were many flights from Cuba or the Soviet Union that were filled with people. When the flights would land in Gander to refuel, they would defect. Early on, it was a trickle, but in the 1980s, it was a downpour. Mac Moss, an author of a book on Gander on 9/11, wrote, Gander was seeing 32 flights a week to and from Cuba. Sometimes the only people on the plane were the crew. An article by Steve McKinley explains that the provincial government initiated a survey of all of the public buildings within a 250-kilometer radius of Gander with the capacity to house refugees. Every school, fire hall, church, service organization, and so on had to identify how many people they could possibly host. The town of Gander had practiced compassion before it needed it. The town was ready to call each one of those 7,000 plain people, known by many different names, their true first name, which was beloved. Each one of them because they had practiced compassion. Now, people of the Jewish faith are in the middle of the festival known as Sukkot. It is a festival which invites people to get closer to vulnerability. Booths or sheds are built that are purposefully not weather tight. There is an invitation in this holiday to sleep out in it, even if it is rainy. A reminder and perhaps a small way to build empathy for the fact that all don't get to choose to sleep outside. A reminder, I said that already. An obligation for the Jewish people to dwell and build in the Sukkah comes from Leviticus, so that your generations may know that I made the Israelites to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Rabbi Elise Wenick writes, its temporary nature, its natural instability, the way it can be permeated by rain and cold, everything about it speaks to the tenuousness of place. With a roof covering that must provide both sun and shade, we are only nominally protected from weather's extremes. The sukkah provides shelter, but it also reminds us that we are not fully at home. Now, over the years, I've been invited by rabbis or rabbinical school students to eat in their sukkah with them. And it's a time of fun and hospitality and delicious food. And perhaps the lesson here is that you get to experience vulnerability with others. It's not meant to be something you do alone. And somehow that community makes it easier. I once asked a rabbi or read somewhere about what to do if it rains when you're in the sukkah, when you're eating in the sukkah. And it's a very practical question. The answer is, if rain fell, from when is it permitted to vacate the sukkah? And the ancient wisdom writes, it is permitted from the point that it is raining so hard that the congealed dish will spoil. Only enough to experience discomfort, but not enough to be uncomfortable. Perhaps there is a lesson too here. Only enough discomfort to hear that response, because sometimes we don't hear or read that enough, that there is something that calls each one of us beloved. So, my friends gathered here, may we find ways to remind our inner critics of our true first name, which is beloved. May we find ways to treat ourselves with compassion and empathy, those authentic selves, the selves which shared these words. Someday, when guests arrive at our door and we find that we have forgotten their names or do not yet know them, we find that the only response necessary is their true first name, which is beloved. May it be so, and amen. We will now hear hymn number 10, Immortal Love, Forever Full. After the postlude, we will move the whiteboard with the things which weigh deepest on our hearts to the back of our gathering place. Please do take someone else's heart so that we can make a little more real the truth that we know, that we share our burdens, and they can be lightened just a little. We are now at the conclusion of our service, which means we will be extinguishing our chalice with the wind. If you're joining us online, you can extinguish your flames and type into the chat, "I carry the flame." We know this truth here as well. And so as we leave this friendly place, we take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we rest, and when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen, and go in peace. bake.